And I'd ask those who would like to stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. All right, that brings us to the roll call. Mr. Clerk, has the roll been taken?
It has. All are present tonight except for Commissioner Verliger, who is absent.
Right, and Mr. Verliger let us know that he was not going to be able to be here this evening.
Correct.
Under proclamations and presentations, I think we have an introduction. Ms. Ridley?
Yes, the first thing we're going to do tonight is introduce our new street superintendent, and John Zhang is going to do the honors. And Matt, if you could come forward, please.
I'm honored to introduce Matt Weaver to the City Commission. Matt joined the city staff as the street department superintendent. Matt graduated from Ferris State University, and after graduation came to work for the city of Mount Pleasant. He worked for the Parks Department, but after nearly 12 years, he left to work for the city of Midland DPW as the supervisor of the Parks and Forestry Department. Matt left the city of Midland in 2011 to head Central Michigan University's landscape operations as the manager. He worked for CMU until a week ago when he started working for our city again. Department head for the street department is an important role in our city. We think we have the right person. It's my pleasure to introduce Matt Weaver. I told him he has to give a long speech to you.
Oh, did you? That'll go over big.
Thank you, everyone. It's glad to be back. A lot of familiar faces, some new ones. So it's kind of getting reacclimated again. Like I said, new faces, some old ones, which was good. So I'm just happy to be back and ready to do some good things. Thanks.
Thank you. We're glad to have you back.
This time we want you to stay until retirement, Matt.
Yeah. All right, that brings us to additions, deletions to the agenda. Do any of the commissioners have any additions or deletions? Any of the staff? I am going to suggest one possible change. If there's no objection, or one of the commissioners had suggested that we move item 23, which is to consider the subrecipient agreement with Northern Initiatives, to the top, because we do have a guest here who's here to answer questions, and we kind of hate to have to wait through the whole meeting. So if there's no objection, the only reason it was on the bottom was because we weren't sure it was going to be on the agenda at all. Otherwise, it probably would have been at the top anyway. So if nobody has any objection, we'll make that the new number 9, and then we'll adjust the rest of the numbers, which should make everybody confused for the rest of the evening. All right, with that change, then we'll go to receipt of petitions and communications.
Yes, tonight under petitions and community public input first.
Oh, thank you for pointing that out.
Well, Jeremy
Right.
and Nancy both did it first.
Right, before we do that, we will go to public input on agenda items. There'll be two opportunities to make public comment tonight, one at the beginning, one at the end of the meeting. At the beginning of the meeting, you're welcome to make comments on any item that's on the agenda, and we ask you to identify yourself, a name and address, and to limit your comments to 5 minutes. And then at the end of the meeting, there will be the opportunity again to address the commission on any item of general city concern. So is there anybody who would like to address the commission? See, I knew there wasn't going to be. The public comment section is closed. Now we're on receipt of petitions and communications. Ms. Ridley?
Yes, in this section you have the report on the pending items, the April minutes of the Parks and Recreation Commission, the correspondence that I mentioned 3 weeks ago from city resident John Joslin regarding the capital improvement plan, and the last communication is correspondence from Tom Manelli regarding his interest in one of the potential fire safety grants for downtown.
Okay. Any questions or comments on any of the petitions and communications? Seeing none, that will bring us to the consent calendar. Before we have Ms. Ridley go through the consent calendar items, is there anybody that would like to have anything removed? Commissioner Gillis.
Number 8, please.
Number 8. That's on the bids and quotations. Anything else that anyone would like to have removed? All right, Ms. Ridley, could you go over the consent items for us?
Yes, you have the minutes of your regular meeting of May 22nd, as well as the 2 closed sessions on that same date. Next, we're recommending a resolution that would amend the standard template that we will use for the facility license agreements with our partner organizations for Little League and softball. As the memo from Mr. Longoria indicates, after the approval in February, the group started working with Union Township on similar agreements. Some differences in wording came up, and so the suggested changes before you tonight really result in no substantive changes to what was previously approved. It will just simplify things so that there's similar wording consistent with both municipalities. Both the attorney and the staff here are comfortable with the changes that are recommended, and you'll notice that they still assume no payment for the use of the fields as you formally approved. So we recommend you approve the resolution which accepts the amended template or the amended agreements. Next is to start the special assessment process for the downtown. And as you know from our work session, this special assessment funds the maintenance and snow removal of the downtown parking lots, as well as the lighting in those lots, the landscaping and beautification of downtown, and the current assessment expires at the end of this year. State law requires that the Principal Shopping District Board make a recommendation to you for a special assessment, and they're recommending the same formula to generate the same amount of funds of $115,000 for both 2018 and 2019. They're also recommending that the calculation be based on the above-ground square footage of the buildings in the downtown. As you know from our process, a special assessment takes 5 resolutions and 2 public hearings. So tonight we're recommending the first 2 resolutions and setting the first public hearing. The first resolution basically deems the need for an assessment, and the second resolution sets the public hearing for June 26th. Based on Vice Mayor Lent's resignation from the Appointments Committee, the mayor's indicated that she plans to appoint herself as the 3rd member to that committee since she was the alternate, and actually no action is needed from you on this item. Due to Mr. Pickler's retirement from code enforcement earlier this month, we're recommending you appoint Captain Andy Latham as the alternate city representative to the 911 Central Dispatch Board to take Mr. Pickler's place. Next, as you know, the draft zoning ordinance will be provided to you and the public by our consultant in a public presentation on July 27th. We're recommending that you hold a work session on that draft ordinance, as we only have one opportunity to make changes to it as part of our contract with the consultant. So I had suggested either a work session on August 14th or a special meeting on August 7th. 2 of you had indicated you preferred the special meeting. 1 of you said you preferred the work session, and the other 4 were silent. So therefore, we've suggested the special meeting on August 7th at 7 p.m. for your discussion. And then the last item on the consent calendar is the approval of payrolls and warrants.
Any questions on any of that before I ask for a motion? Seeing none, is there,
I'm sorry, I
Vice Mayor
really
Lentz?
don't want to open this can of worms, but I want to make sure, for the special assessment, I feel like there's something about a roll call vote, but I'm not for those resolutions. We don't have to.
Not that I'm
Okay.
aware of.
All right, good, because I didn't want to do that, but I didn't want to get into it and then have to do it again.
Thank you. Anything else? All right, then is there a motion to accept the consent? Motion made by Commissioner Kulik, seconded by Commissioner Maddie to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that takes care of the consent agenda. That then brings us back to number 8, which is bids and quotations, and the bid is for pavement markings. Ms. Ridley?
Yes, we're recommending a bid or a contract with M&M Pavement Markings for a not-to-exceed amount of $21,720. This bid would include the street markings that were reflected on the map in your packet and an up to $2 amount for the downtown parking lots for the restriping. As I mentioned in the memo, we need to review some of our downtown lots to make sure when we stripe them that the appropriate number of ADA spaces that are required under current regulations are appropriately accommodated. And if some additional modification is needed to ensure those appropriate spaces, we may not be able to stripe all of the lots this year because we may not have time to get all the modifications done. So we recommend approval of the contract with M&M Pavement Markings.
Okay, is there a motion? Commissioner Kulik?
Move to approve the contract as presented.
Is there a second? Second by Vice Mayor Lentz. Discussion. Commissioner Gillis?
I took this off the consent calendar just so that we could think and reconsider some of the pavement markings for the bike lanes as we continue to put more pavement markings on our streets and also the signs that go along with the shared bike lanes. I do realize that we would like bikes and people to be able to walk around Mount Pleasant, but the cost of maintaining that infrastructure is, even if it is just paint, and the cost of the signage, I am reluctant to do this everywhere in Mount Pleasant. I think people have enough problems as it is, navigating roads, keeping an eye on the speed limit, keeping an eye on pedestrians and bicycles. When we're taking roads and we are putting in so many other signs for them to read, if anyone's gone down Main and Washington to see every 100 feet or every block, there's share the road with the bicycle signs. I think sometimes motorists, it ends up being more confusing to motorists when we have too many directions on our streets, be it signs that we now have to maintain forever or the pavement markings, the paint that we're putting on. So I took this off. It's not that I am not considerate of bicycles and walkers through our city, but I'm also concerned at the cost and long-term implications of continuing to take every street and paint and signs, and I think it's going to come back and be a real cost to us that we're not going to be able to maintain in the future. So I just want the City Commission to be mindful that every time we do this, we're taking on something that will be a cost to us forever.
Thank you. Commissioner Kulik.
Could I ask that we have from our police department annually a report on the number of car, bicycle, and car pedestrian incidents that are in the city, and whether they're on streets that are marked for bike lanes or not bike lanes, and let that help us be our guide?
Ms. Ridley, do you think there'd be any problem with our getting that kind of information?
I think getting the report out of our system would be fairly easy. I think the more challenging piece would be what the markings would be, because as we look at multiple years, we would then have to look back at the construction records to see when the markings were done to be able to do that. But we can certainly attempt that. The first piece is easy. The second piece may be a bit of work, so we'll have to see how we can pull that off.
Okay.
Anybody object? I think there's value. We are in a new area, you know, in terms of trying to accommodate complete streets and pedestrians and cyclists, and I think we're all kind of struggling with what's the best way to do it. I'm in favor of what we're doing tonight, but I certainly think there's value in both what Commissioner Gillis said about looking at the costs and also Commissioner Kulik's point about we need to look at what the impact is and are we increasing safety, and the issue of the safety of pedestrians and cyclists is something I think that we're all concerned about, so I think that's a reasonable accommodation. Anything else? Commissioner Kulik. Commissioner Matt-Aye.
I just wanted to point out a bit of the irony, I suppose, of, or maybe I'm not using irony in the wrong sense, but, we have two agenda items tonight. The first one is this item here to, for lane markings, and it, to have a properly designed road, in the first place is more likely to be a preventative measure to, stop, for example, bicycle accidents. And then, down on later in our agenda, we have a letter of support toward legislation in support of essentially a safer distance when cars overtake bikes on the road. So, while ultimately the sanction of the latter is viewed to be important, the action here in the former, with the lane markings and having a properly designed road, will go much further, in terms of having safe transportation in this town, so I'll support
you.
this.
Anything else? Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of approving the contract for the pavement marking, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? Okay, thank you. All right, then that brings us to the new number 9, which was the former 23, which is to consider a subrecipient agreement with Northern Initiatives and appoint committee members, which is presented to us as a single motion on item 23. So, Ms. Ridley?
As some of you on the commission will recall, the MEDC essentially required us to turn over our federal revolving loan funds to a regional authority in 2013, and those funds were to be administered by a regional representative out of Saginaw. We also previously asked you to pass a notice of intent to use some of the funds for a homeowner program that MEDC was looking at putting together, but did not actually come to fruition. So since the last time we talked about this matter, Saginaw has given up their revolving loan funds to the MEDC, and MEDC has allowed them to terminate the contract they had to be the regional representative. MEDC has indicated that they prefer that the revolving loan funds be used for business loans, and they've chosen Northern Initiatives of Marquette, Michigan as the new regional administrator. So Mr. Dennis West of Northern Initiatives is here tonight and will be prepared to give you a little bit of an overview of his firm and the program with the MEDC. But before he does that, I'll just make a couple more comments. MEDC has told us that they'll extend our ability to use the funds for business loans in Mount Pleasant until June 30 of 2018 if you approve the subrecipient agreement with Northern Initiatives as the administrator. As you know, once they're loaned and then paid back, the more stringent federal guidelines would no longer apply to those funds and they would be more readily available. There's no cost to the city as the administrative fees are paid from the loan funds. So essentially the action we're asking you to take tonight would allow us an additional year to identify companies in the city that are eligible and willing to go through the federal regulatory process to obtain these loans, and Northern Initiatives would help with that, assist with that process. If you don't approve it, essentially our community loses access to those funds, which are approximately $459,000. So after Mr. West gives you the overview, we'll be recommending you approve the agreement that was in your packet with Northern Initiatives, authorize the transfer of the fund, and appoint Marianne Cornexel and Jim McBride as the loan committee representatives. So with that, I would introduce Mr. Dennis West from Northern Initiatives.
Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. Northern Initiatives, we're a private nonprofit. They're based in Marquette. We were created by Northern Michigan University, and we were created at a time when unemployment in the Upper Peninsula was 15%, and the university had a deep concern about the number of students who were from the UP. So they created Northern Initiatives to try to build a more diverse and resilient Upper Peninsula economy. What we focus on are loans and assisting our borrowers with business knowledge services. So since we first started lending money in 1994, we've now loaned $57 million. The average loan size is about $57,000. A third of our loans have gone to startup businesses, around 40% to women-owned businesses. And that's what we do, is we help startups and we work with community banks and subordinate our loans to help growing businesses. It's all family-owned businesses. And in 2007, we came into Lower Michigan. So we actually are doing loans in Isabella County. We have done about $600,000 in loans. We've worked with Your Smart Zone with 3 customers now. And so that's the general overview. We possess about $18 million in total loans. We manage about $5 million of regional revolving loan funds currently. And by the end of June, we will have closed $1.8 million of the $5 million that we're administering. So, so we understand how to make loans using this capital, and we'd love to have the opportunity to work with you and have your trust that we'll keep moving this forward this year.
Okay, thank you very much. Do commissioners have questions? Commissioner Kulik.
How will this work practically? Let's say I want to open a widget shop downtown Mount Pleasant. I would contact Jim first, then he would put me in touch with you. How exactly will I know that you're out there with money?
It could work that way. It could work that you come to us directly. It could work that you work with the DDA. So we'll work to try to make sure that lots of different people know about the opportunity that we have. About 70% of our loans start with bankers. So they really look at something and say, you know, this does make sense, and it just doesn't fit the requirements of our bank. So a lot of people started a bank, and then the banker, wanting to make sure that they can start their business, refers them to Northern Initiatives. But you know, we're very dependent upon building referral points, and so we'll spend a lot of time over the next 90 days trying to make sure that that lots of institutions in Mount Pleasant understand who we are, what we do, and how we do it.
Could we get something on our website, our web page that says business expansion, business whatever, contact Northern Initiatives?
We could add that to our economic development section. Both Bill and Michelle have also met with Mr. West, and they know of his availability too, so as they meet with potentials. But yeah, we can push that out with our other programs.
I mean, it's just, I mean, I remember Jim talking in the past that so much of it now, people are web surfing and not even making contact, and if they see that bug there, maybe that'll be what pushes them our way.
Other questions that commissioners have? Commissioner Gillis.
Do you have any office that's centrally located here in Lower Michigan rather than in Marquette?
We have a lender in Grayling currently, and we're looking to add another lender that'll be on the western side of Michigan. We did some interviews last week, so we'll have a second in Lower Michigan soon.
And your facility up in Marquette, is that an office building? Because I noticed your address was a P.O. box.
Yeah. We're on the university campus, and the reason we have to use a P.O. box is Northern Michigan University has one address. And so if something comes to the P.O. box, we get it quickly. If it goes through university mail, it takes several days.
Been there. Other questions? I have one question. Those of you who looked at the history of this, it's been a long history and a lot of frustration over the ability to be able to spend that almost $500,000. And what we've been told all this time is that it's just very difficult to work through all those various federal loopholes. So have you had experience in working with that type, with the community development funds, whatever the current name of them is, the CLP? And how confident are you that you are going to be able to figure out ways to be able to work around those so that we might be able to utilize that money?
You know, we try to keep it in a pretty narrow niche, either equipment or working capital, because those trigger less issues. Okay. So if you use the money in connection with construction, or you use it for equipment that requires some construction, for acquisition of a building, then it triggers other things that slow down the process. And so the real challenge is that I think the fastest you could do a loan under the requirements that you have to deal with is probably 60 days. But if it falls into construction or other things, it's going to be 6 months. So generally, it's that we don't want to do that to a customer if we can help it. So we have other funds that if it was a construction project that we would try to make available and use rather than to use the revolving loan fund. So it's a little tricky because we're always threading the needle based upon what the needs of the customers are, what the requirements of this fund are, and so we're not going to impose on everybody. I mean, the other side of what we do is we're trying to shorten the time that it takes for a customer to get a loan. And then we have these requirements in this particular program. So it's being out there far enough in advance that you can understand what the time frame and needs of the customer are, and trying to make sure that we're doing the most responsible thing we can for the customer, and where it fits, we try to use these funds.
Okay, thank you. Vice Mayor Lentz.
So as we interact with potential business owners or people who want to expand, what types of things, you said you'd like to keep it a narrow niche. Can you give me some examples of people or types of businesses or projects that would be a good fit for this particular program? So if someone says, oh, I wanted to do this, we can go, oh, yeah, that was, or is that too difficult to kind of?
In thinking about what we've done, about half of the loan, so we've got 28 loans that we've either closed or are in the pipeline or some stage working toward closing. So about half of those are manufacturers, and so providing working capital or equipment for manufacturers. A couple of them are microbreweries that we're doing working capital with. We have 2 restaurants. We had a small family-owned pharmacy that we did. We're in the process of making one loan to a nonprofit that focuses on home health care. So it's quite a range of things that we've been able to do. A salsa company is in the works.
Anything else? Commissioner Gillis.
And are these loans all for Michigan-based industries?
Oh, yeah.
They all have to reside within Michigan?
Yeah, and I mean, that's what we do, is family-owned businesses. So we're going to have more impact maybe in a downtown or with manufacturers who are family-owned businesses. Those are the kinds of areas we focus on.
And I noticed, I wasn't here when this first developed way back when, and there was part of it that was homeowner assistance or for homeowners. Do you ever see any of this $500,000 being available to residents or homeowners again?
You know, we can work with the city, and that's not what we do. But if that would be your desire, we can try to work with you to figure out what that path could look like. You know, all I know is from the business lending side, you know, what you're trying to work with is a half sentence benefiting low and moderate income people, but underneath that half sentence is 2 inches of regulations. And I'm sure it's probably the same sets of issues whether you're working with homeowners or small businesses. And we just, you know, now have the experience of working through that 2 inches and doing some small business loans. So it's always a question of what's the capacity locally to work on the home ownership. But I mean, if that's your desire as we get through the next year to look at trying to do some things with home ownership, we'd be happy to help you and work with you on that. It's just we wouldn't do it. We don't know how to do it.
Okay, any other questions? Well, thank you very much for being here. And that then brings us back to the motion. And the motion is to authorize the city manager to execute the agreement with Northern Initiatives, authorize the transfer of CLP funds to Northern Initiatives, and appoint Mary Ann Cornexel and Jim McBride to the revolving loan committee. Is there anyone who would like to make that motion? Commissioner Kulik. Is there a second? Commissioner Holden. Any discussion? All right. Seeing none, good luck with this. All those in favor of approving this motion, say aye. Aye. Those opposed? All right. Great, thank you. All right, that brings us to the next item, which is it's now the new item 10. Consider amendment to contract with County Line Power for the purchase and installation of pedestrian lighting on West Broadway Street. Ms. Ridley?
Yes, as you know, we received some tribal 2% funds in the last allocation to install pedestrian lighting on Broadway. The primary reason that Broadway was recommended was due to the connection to the park system and the downtown from the west side. The application to the tribe indicated that the money would be used on Broadway west of Harris Street. So we've provided two options for you this evening. One would use the full $60,000 by utilizing the per unit pricing with County Line to amend the contract, which would install lights from Harris to Maxwell. The other alternative we've given you is when we did the competitive bids earlier this year, we actually asked for bids from Harris to Adams as an alternate. So we had bids from every company in that area, and County Lines would have been for an amount of, I forgot to write down the dollar amount. Let me find my page here.
31,640.
Thank you, 31,640. And so if you choose that option, we would carry forward the rest of the funds and we would rebid that with the 2018 project to go further west on Broadway. We're recommending to you tonight that you take option one and utilize the full $60,000 because those per unit prices were the best bid, and it would complete that section all the way to Maxwell this year.
Is there a motion? Vice Mayor Lentz.
I move to approve the amendment to the contract with County Line Power for an additional $60,000 for the installation and pedestrian lighting on Broadway Street from Harris to Maxwell.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Kulik. So the motion on the floor is to amend the contract to spend the $60,000 for pedestrian lighting that would go from Harris to Maxwell. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Gillis.
Can this 2% grant be placed on the $87,000 that we're already spending on the lighting from the railroad track to Harris?
I don't believe so because the application was pretty clear that it would be from Harris to the west is what we would use the funds on.
Commissioner Gillis.
I also have some concerns about lighting pollution, and although pedestrian lighting is needed in some of the M2 areas where we have a lot of pedestrians walking from the college downtown, I'm hesitant that we need pedestrian lighting all the way down Broadway at this time and at the cost that it's going to take to put up those pedestrian lighting and then for future expenses with electricity and the light bulbs. So at this time, I will be voting no on this.
Any other discussion? All right. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of amending this with the $60,000 in order to install lighting from Harris to Maxwell, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Next item is to consider approval of the Mission Pickard Downtown Development Authority Plan, which I think we've seen several times. Ms. Ridley?
Yes, since you have talked about it several times, I'll keep my comments very brief to not belabor it. In summary, the action before you tonight would do two things. It would amend the plan for the Mission Pickard corridor to allow consideration of additional projects. It would also extend the financing from 2018 to 2025 to allow capture for projects that you approve as part of the budget process. So we recommend approval of the ordinance amendment as drafted.
All right, and so the appropriate motion would be to approve the ordinance related to the Mission Pickard Downtown Development Authority Plans extension as presented.
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner Kulik, seconded by Commissioner Maddie to extend the Downtown Development Authority Plan to 2025 and the projects that were included as part of the plan. Any discussion? Commissioner Gillis.
I will try to be brief and not belabor this because I've
Okay.
spoke on this last two
I
meetings.
think I know where you're probably going to be coming from on it.
So this is more for the public's information than it is our fellow commissioners. This DDA has been in existence since 1990. It was first a capturing of, I think, 35 or 37%, and then was reduced to 28%. captured hundreds of thousands of dollars. Just to give you an idea, in 2017, this will be this year, that the DDA will capture $269,000, 2018, $270,000, 2019, $272,000, the next year, $273,000, $274,000, $276,000, $277,000, that's hundreds of thousands of dollars, $277,000. 2024, $279,000, and 2025, $280,000 the DDA will capture. That's an 8-year extension. Along with this capture, just to reiterate 1 year of the capture and what it's taking from different entities. In 2016, it's taking from our Mount Pleasant tax base $157,000. From the Chippewa River District Library, $17,000. From our Isabella County, $65,000. From our medical care facility, almost $7,000. From the Commission on Aging, $8,750. From our parks, $3,500. From ICTC, $8,594, for a total in 2016 of $268,000 we're capturing from these entities. Library, Commission on Aging. So as the city, and we're possibly continuing this DDA, we are literally taking from these entities, whatever the commission decides, we're taking from the library and using it for our own infrastructures, which I really don't think it's fair to the city voters who voted for millages on Commission on Aging and our library, that we are capturing those monies for our own use. I don't think that's fair. I would be much more comfortable just capturing our own city taxes rather than everyone else's. So as they capture these hundreds of thousands of dollars, what is in the plan for the 8-year extension are these things: decorative street lighting along the Mission Pickard corridor of $1,800,000. Also, alley improvement and reconstruction of $500,000. That's $500,000. And the Mission Street corridor study, that is for a impact traffic flow, a recommendation on what kind of businesses should come into the Mission Street corridor, and some of the impact traffic studies, and those will cost $100,000. And then after they identify certain businesses that they want to come to the Mission Pickard corridor, they're planning on giving $300,000 of incentives to these new businesses. I don't think that's fair to other businesses that have been able to keep up their taxes and their business and have been paying their fair share for several years, several decades, whereas now new businesses, as we identify new businesses, how we're going to get them to relocate to Mission and Pickard is by giving them free money or taxpayer money. We constantly talk about other things we'd like to do in the community. One thing that I know constantly is being asked for us to look into is our swimming pool, a community swimming pool. We also have brush pickup this year, but we don't have, that's not going to continue after this year because we don't have the funds of $30,000 a year for community-wide city brush pickup. Yet we have hundreds of thousands of dollars for decorative lighting along Mission and Pickard. And I just want to remind everyone, along Pickard, we're Finance Authority in Union Township put in decorative lighting and baskets and benches. Those benches are usually empty. I have never seen anyone enjoying Pickard, East Pickard, by sitting in those benches. So I really don't think this is a good use of money. I don't think we should continue the DDA, and I think we could prioritize what's needed on the Mission and Pickard corridor along with all the other priorities for the city of Mount Pleasant.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Commissioner Maddie.
The first is more in light of in the nature of a question, just to clarify one point. The library millages today are exempt from capture. Is that correct?
As of December 31st of last year, they're exempt from automatic capture. They can voluntarily decide to allow the capture to continue, and a presentation has been made to the library board, and they're considering that at this point, but have not given us an answer yet.
So basically, prior to that date, there was an automatic capture, but then it's up to the library's discretion whether or not they will agree to a capture?
Yeah, because the state law changed at the end of last year.
Okay, thank you. I'll be supporting this, and I'm coming from the perspective of, we as a commission recently addressed another issue which uses a lot of similar terminology and concept with brownfields. And I supported restrictions on that given the nature of brownfield programs, but specifically with this DDA issue before us, like the question before us today is specifically about the ability for the DDA to continue to capture revenue into a point into the future. And I generally would be supportive of DDA programs and the concepts related to that because it's designed to focus investment in a specific geographic area. So, an investment in one particular segment within that geographic area will inevitably benefit others along the way, and on as the life of the authority in the financing program continues. And that's in contrast to the issues with brownfields where we focused specifically on specific properties. And then the other nature of the difference too is the fact that, and this is something that I imagine will be an issue coming up by the end of the year, the decisions ultimately that are supposed to be made on part of the DDA are based on their budget, which comes before us. So if there's anything that is not generally supported by this commission, it won't be in the budget. And this is something that is decided every year along the way. Now that's in contrast to brownfields because so much of that is front-loaded in terms of the commission's participation in that program. So anyway, I bring all that comparison up in light of I recognize the concerns that that is inherent in tax captures, and it's ultimately my goal is, I'm sure, the goal of every commissioner to be prudent with taxpayers' money, and in this particular instance, moving forward, I would like the focus to be on the ability to capture the tax revenue rather than any specific ideas that may be on the table at some point in the months in the future. So, thank you.
Thank you. Are there other comments? All right, Commissioner Gillis?
I would like to make an amendment to the motion that we only capture the city's portion of the tax increments and we relieve the other entities from the tax captures so that they can have the monies that the voters.
I don't believe you can do that.
Did you want to be recognized, Commissioner Kulik? Commissioner Kulik?
I don't believe you can do that under the act.
Ms. Ridley, do you know whether or not we are able to do that?
I don't believe so. Mary Ann's shaking her head. She doesn't believe so. We would actually need a legal opinion to know for certain, but I don't think you can.
Although, if I can add to that point, I mean, if ultimately capture decisions are made, like in terms of rates, if that's decided around budget time, then if there's a legal opinion that could be sought on the subject, I would think that, that's something that would fit it square within the regular budget timetable. So there, I don't think.
So you're asking that perhaps between now and when we approve the budget, we find out whether or not there are any options dealing with whether or not all of it is captured or just, I know at the time that we approve the budgets, we approve the amount of the capture. and the
percentages.
percentage of the capture, and perhaps we could find out whether or not, at that time, we also had the authority or not to determine who it's captured from. I have no idea. I know when it's initially done, that you might be able to make those decisions, but I don't know, when you're already in the process, so.
Because that would be a capture of approximately $158,000 from the city's portion, and then the rest of the entities would have their own.
So at this point, unless there's a second to that amendment will die, but we'll pursue information to find out what the legal possibilities are. Any other discussion? I'm going to vote in favor of this, but I think that during the course of all of these discussions that we've made it clear that we do think it's important that as the budgets are presented, that it is clear that whatever the money is spent on, and that's what we'll look at when we approve the budget in the fall, that there is reason to believe that it will increase tax value over and above what would have happened if we didn't have those projects. Because I think in terms of determining that it is in fact legitimate to be able to continue to capture the money, that's one of the issues that we need to deal with. And I think we've talked about that as one of the things that we're trying to communicate to the DDA board, that we want to make sure that in fact everybody in the long run is better off than they would have been without it. So I think those are some legitimate questions that have been raised, and this discussion will continue as we get into the fall budget. Any other discussion? Then the motion on the floor is to approve the extension of the DDA Development Authority Plan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
All right, that then brings us to considering the approval of the 2018-2022 Capital Improvement Plan, which we've been discussing for several months. We had a public hearing at our last meeting on this, and tonight is when the charter requires that we vote on the Capital Improvement Plan. Ms. Ridley?
Yes, the recommendation for you tonight is as presented back in April and May to you with two small changes. One is to change the funding source for the 2018 new sidewalks. The original plan recommended utilizing capital improvement funds as that funding source, and the amended pages that are in your packet instead recommend using the Act 51 funds, which is an appropriate use of those funds. The other small tweak is to ensure that we gather public input prior to 2021 on changing Pickard west of Mission to potentially 3 lanes. It seemed like the general agreement during the discussions was that the other projects may be delayed if needed in 2018 in order to ensure the operating budget is balanced. But at this point, we would leave the plan as is and have those further discussions during the operating budget. The Planning Commission, as you know, has recommended approval. At the last meeting, the question was raised about whether TIFA funds in the downtown could be used for fire suppression systems. And Scott Smith, our city attorney, looked further into that and indicated that that is an appropriate use of TIFA funds, even if some of it ends up being used in the private property. So I would also mention that we have 7 property owners in the downtown who have indicated an interest in that fire suppression grant program if it's eventually approved. So we recommend you approve the capital improvement plan as amended in your packet with those changes to the sidewalk funding.
So is there a motion to approve the plan? Commissioner Kulik.
Move to approve the capital improvement plan as amended.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Maddie. Any discussion? Vice Mayor Lentz.
I will just make one comment. I know that people have been critical about the fire suppression grant and would like me to abstain from voting on that grant program, but although I have a building that is in need of renovation, I am nowhere anytime in the next probably at least 10 years away from being able or wanting to put apartments into that building and would ever need to or want to use fire suppression. So I am going to not abstain because I have no intention of going down that road because that is more than I can handle at this point in my life.
Would you be more comfortable if we approved the capital improvement plan without the fire suppression in it and then come back and do the fire suppression as a separate item?
Whatever makes you happy. I just know that that has been a comment. And
Well, in an attempt to keep you your appearance in the community that there's no conflict of interest, I'd like to propose that we amend the capital improvement plan as submitted by taking out the fire suppression plan. That way we can vote as a plan as a whole. Then I'll make a motion to approve the fire suppression plan, and then she can abstain if she would prefer.
Actually, I'm going to ask the parliamentarian. I think, and that with a motion that's a multi-part motion, that we could have a motion to separate out one part of that motion, vote on that separately. We could vote on that separately and then go back and vote on the entire item.
I think that's what you're asking, right, is to just remove that one section?
Okay. And,
I was going to do it the opposite way, but that's fine.
yeah. So, the motion on the floor is to separate the motion and vote on the fire suppression separately. Okay. So I'm going to vote on our doing that.
You have to have a second.
Yeah, is there a second? Second by Commissioner Holton. So the motion on the floor would be to separate this motion into two parts and vote on them separately, one, the fire suppression, and the other, the budget as a whole. Any discussion on that? All those in favor of separating the motion in as described, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? All right, so we'll vote on the fire suppression separate first as an item in the capital improvement budget, and then we will vote on the entire capital improvement budget, if that's clear to everybody. Okay, so the motion on the floor now is to consider the part of the motion on the fire suppression program. Is there any discussion? Vice Mayor Lentz.
Mayor, I'd like to recuse myself from this vote.
All right, seeing no objection, you will be recused from this vote. Is there any further discussion?
Just a point of parliamentary procedure.
Yes.
Do we need a first and a second on this, and also first and second on the next motion to improve the plan, or is it, you're wrapping it all into one?
Well,
Just a
good
parliamentary
question.
procedure
Yes, a
question.
Good question. I think we probably do need a first and a second. I was thinking that we had that, but maybe we didn't.
We wanted to split it. but
Right, we
didn't
voted to
now.
split it, and so I think that's probably well taken. Do we have a motion to approve the suppression plan? Motion made by Commissioner Kulik. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Holton. So the motion is to vote on the part of the plan dealing with fire suppression at this point. Parliamentarians may be turning over in their grave at this point, but as long as everybody's comfortable with this. Any discussion then on the fire suppression plan? Commissioner Maddie.
I'll draw on a lot of the comments I was making earlier, regarding DDAs and the specific investment that you would have in a specific geographic location. As reflected by the fact that, given changes in code and the cost of the renovations at issue, and the fact that, the sum of those factors together means right now, vacant apartment buildings. And if the goal is to direct investment into, downtowns, which, cities, across the state, recognize the importance of investing in downtowns, having, vibrant residential living space available, is an important feature of downtowns. And if this is a program that can move in that direction, there's been a lot of talk about the focus is primarily on, the private, building owner, but, that is step one. But, step two, and, every step thereafter is the general economic development benefit of, having people living downtown, greater interest downtown. And overall, this is a program that I think is a step in the right direction, so I'll be supporting this.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Holton.
I apologize, I wasn't at the last meeting. Was there discussion on this? Is this truly a grant from an outside source, or is this from the city granting,
It would be from the TIFA funds. It would be a grant from the TIFA funds.
so still within the city, but not an outside entity granting? Okay, thank you very much.
Any other discussion? Commissioner Gillis.
I will not be supporting this grant program, Not that I am not aware not that I am not concerned about fire safety suppression in upstairs apartments, but I do believe that falls on the property owner. When you're capturing money from a finance authority, the TIFA, and you're capturing it from every business owner downtown, and then you are giving this money out in $25,000 increments to people who own a building downtown to be able to have fire suppression from the sidewalk into their building, fire suppression in their apartments, fire extinguishers and the such, because this does allow people to use that $25,000 inside their own building. I don't think that's fair to the other business owners downtown. I also don't think it actually adds value to certain businesses downtown that someone now is allowed or are able to have apartments in their second story building because they were given $25,000 of taxpayer money to do it. This doesn't do anything to some of the outlying areas that pay into the TIFA. It is the responsibility of the business owner if they want an upstairs apartment to have fire suppression. So I am not in favor of this, along with the comments from citizens that came and said that they don't think that we should be giving $25,000 away to business owners to allow them to make a profit turning their apartments into, or their second stories into apartments. There have been business owners that have already incurred this expense on their own. They wanted it to happen, they made it happen, they took their own money. Now we're giving money away, and it's not really fair to those people who have already invested on making those apartments habitable by fire suppression. They didn't get in on this, not that I would have been in favor of that in the first place, but it's not fair for people who have already went down that road, put up the money to have apartments, and now we're establishing what sounds like a grant program, but it isn't. It's $25,000 a pop from the Tax Increment Finance Authority, which is taxpayer dollars. So I will be voting against this.
Commissioner Kulik.
I'll be supporting this. The other apartments that were built in the downtown did not, the code did not require fire suppression. Basically, all they had to do was have double layer 5/8 drywall between the commercial use on the first floor and the apartment above, which is a lot cheaper expense than having to tap the main, bring the water in, and put the full fire suppression. So I will be supporting this.
Okay, other discussion?
Can I make an amendment to the motion?
Well, you can always make an emotion, yes.
Could we make the source of funding grant funded, actual grant funded, like in the title, rather than the Tax Increment Finance Authority? So it would be a responsibility for someone to find monies in a grant rather than taking it from the Finance Authority.
Is there a second for that?
Just for conversation, for the mayor's purpose.
All right, we have a motion on the floor to have it be grant funded. That's been seconded for discussion. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Holton.
The question have to be asked is, are there grants available for this out there? Is there any exploration on that from other cities? Have you researched any of that?
Let me start that discussion, and then if I don't cover everything adequately, our downtown development director is here and can add to it if need be. We did research some grants for availability, and the only one we found that might have been a potential was the one that we recently did for the infrastructure capacity enhancement grant, which we chose to apply for a water tower instead. And the primary reason we didn't do this program under it is because we were afraid we would overbuild the infrastructure, because to do it under the grant program, we would have, not knowing who was truly interested in utilizing the program, we would have had to put leads to every property owner or every other property owner and hope that they could share them. And so the design was extremely difficult to do, not knowing exactly who would take advantage of it. So we deemed that that would not be a good use of those funds, nor would it be appropriately designed in a timely manner. So that was the only one we found, and it didn't seem to fit with the timing. I think that covers it.
Follow-up question. could this be a project that would come out of the Economic Development Fund that we have set aside instead?
Certainly.
Just an idea.
Commissioner Cooley.
As it's set up now, it would be an outright grant. Could we structure this as either a forgivable loan or a loan that's due on the sale of the building? So you put the apartment on the second floor, the $25,000 goes into it, you hold on to the building for another 25 years. At the end of 25 years, we get our $25,000 back when you sell the property.
Are you crazy?
Sure.
I'm going to suggest that at this point, that's a very interesting concept, but not really directly relevant to the motion that's on the floor, and this is getting pretty complicated at this point. The motion on the floor is to amend the budget so that the funding would not come from the TIFA, but would come from a to-be-determined grant. So I'd like to kind of keep the discussion focused on whether or not there are grants available. I'm going to vote against this motion because things are getting very complicated, but also because two things are true. The search that we've done for this at this point has not been productive in finding the grant. And the second thing is I think that we can include the funding in the capital improvement project that's there, but letting the staff know if in fact it's possible to find grants that we could substitute. There's nothing that says we can't change the source of funding as we go along. And in fact, I think city staff in general has been really good about utilizing grants and substituting that grant money when it becomes available. So I'm confident that if in fact there were grant money available, and if we made it clear we'd like the city to continue to search for that grant money, that they would do that. But I would rather, if one is in favor of doing the fire suppression program, I think at least at this point, we should not be making it totally determined on grants. And so I'm going to vote against this particular motion, and then when we get back to the main motion of the fire suppression, I might make another suggestion. But at this point, I think that leaving it to some undetermined grant when we've already been unsuccessful in finding a grant is, from my perspective, almost the same thing as saying that we're not going to do the program. So for that reason, I'm going to vote against it. Is there other discussion? Seeing no other discussion, then the motion on the floor is to amend the section of the capital improvement budget for the fire suppression program to say that it will only be funded if we're able to find grants for that program. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
I'm going to ask for a show of hands. All those in favor say aye. 2. All those opposed? Okay, we've got 3. I'm going to ask the parliamentarian for a determination.
3 to 2 fails. Or there's 3 to 2. 2 to 3, sorry. 2 to 3, the motion fails. The amendment.
Okay. So the amendment fails. So we're back to discussing the amendment. I'm sorry. We're back to discussing the motion on fire suppression. Is there any further discussion?
We do not have to specify tonight in the capital improvement budget exactly how that fire suppression plan will work, nor do we have to specify tonight whether there'll be any repayment on it, correct?
That is correct. All you're approving tonight is the concept of the program, and I didn't want to complicate things, but I was going to indicate that the actual program itself will come back at a later time. Since it's TIFA funded, the TIFA board would approve the program parameters, but we need to make sure that the program is allowed in the TIFA plan. So you will likely talk about it in one way, shape, or form again in the future, but I don't know that this board would necessarily get involved in the parameters unless you said the only way we would allow the funding is if we had input into the parameters. So it could get even more confusing when it comes back, if you want to go down that road.
The basic concept that we're discussing is whether or not we want to have some kind of a fire suppression program where there's use of some city money. involved in one way or another, whether it's the grant money or TIFA money or some other fund. So the motion is, do we want to have fire suppression, a fire suppression program as part of the capital improvement plan? Commissioner Gillis.
Just last reiteration, this is $100,000 for the next 3 years, so that will be $300,000 captured by the TIFA, which is taxpayer money, to give to building owners for second-story apartments. $300,000 for the next 3 years.
I'm going to ask for the parliamentarian whether or not we need a majority of those present voting, or
For the passage of the CIP as a whole, or the section we're on?
well, the section that we're on.
The section
that
we're
we're
on.
Being that we're only dealing right now with 5 people.
Right.
So would 3 pass?
The CIP is a resolution, so it's not, according to the charter?
I don't think so.
It's not? Okay. If it's not a resolution, I was thinking that it had to be a resolution. If it's not a resolution, then a simple majority works.
Okay, good, I like that answer. It just because it simplifies things, not because I'm on either side of the issue, it's just because it simplifies things. All right, so the motion on the floor is for fire suppression. Before I call for a vote, if there's no other discussion, I am going to vote in favor of this. I think there have been some interesting issues raised. I think if we can find some other funding to help with that, that'd be great. But from my perspective, we've been talking about trying to increase the amount of housing downtown for a long time, and I know from the years that I've been here, one of the primary reasons why we haven't been able to do that is because of the new requirements on the fire suppression. So from my perspective, at least, I think it does meet what has been a very significant goal of the city for the last, almost the whole 10 years. Well, in fact, since 2003, I think, when the original downtown plan was approved. So I think there have been some good arguments and issues raised, but I am going to be supporting this program. Any other discussion? All right, then. All those in favor of including the fire suppression program as part of the capital improvement budget, say aye. Aye. Those opposed?
No.
So, I'm going to do a show of hands. All those in favor, raise their hand. All those opposed? All right, on a 3-2 vote, fire suppression part of the capital improvement plan has now been approved. And we're now going to go, I will ask for a motion for all of the other items in the capital improvement plan. All right, so we now have a motion that has been seconded to approve all the rest of the items in the capital improvement plan. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Gillis.
There are still many projects that are planned for 2018 that I don't think is a good use of taxpayer money. Some of them in particular are the Industrial Park South Retention Pond of $84,000 from private developer, and the EIF, the Economic Initiative Fund. Thank you, Ms. Ridley. It seems that they have not thought in the future, when people started buying the industrial park parcels, that they would have to expand the retention pond. That might be coming into consideration, and the $84,000 is to do that. The Industrial Park South tenants were asked if they would be in favor of a special assessment of all those properties to increase the retention pond, and of course they said no. So now that falls back on the taxpayers. Many of the parcels out on the Industrial South Park have had tax facilities abatements, that's tax breaks from what the Lansing legislatures provide. So they're already getting quite the tax break for developing in that industrial park. So I do believe it can fall on the responsibilities of the parcels that are remaining and the industries that are out there to pay for the funding for that expansion of that retention pond, being that they're getting a tax break on their taxes. I also do not agree with $100,000 to reinvest in Mission Street. That allows new businesses, new construction along Mission Street for taxpayer dollars to pay for decorative fencing, some of the other things that they go along with construction. We are now taking taxpayer dollars and giving that to new businesses that want to pop up along Mission Street. And there are a few other things, the fire safety grant program that was just pulled out, but that passed. So there were things in here that I don't think gives value to the city, and I don't think is a good use of taxpayer dollars, so I will be voting no against this.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other comments? All right, seeing no other comments, then the motion on the floor is the approval of all of the rest of the capital improvement plan other than the fire suppression program. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
All right, thank you very much. All right, that brings us to the item to consider the amendment to the downtown outdoor dining policy. Ms. Ridley?
At your last meeting, you postponed action on 2 exception requests regarding this policy. One having to do with fees in areas where there was angle parking, and one having to do with ADA compliance. The downtown boards have held a special meeting in between your 2 meetings, and they have recommended a new policy to you this evening. The recommended policy has no change in the fee structure, and as a matter of fact, the applicant has actually withdrawn their request for the exception in regard to that matter. The downtown boards have recommended new wording to you to allow various ways to make patios ADA compliant, all which meet the ADA requirements according to the building official. The downtown boards also discussed whether wording was needed to protect the new ADA spaces that will be constructed on the street downtown this summer, and those downtown boards concluded that it likely wasn't needed. But at the staff level, we would suggest we go ahead and add a sentence just to make it crystal clear that we don't intend for those spaces to be used for outdoor patios. So before you tonight is an amended policy that is in your packet, which addresses the 2 exception requests which were postponed, includes the new ADA language, and also includes a sentence about not using the ADA parking spaces for patios. So we recommend you approve the revised policy as presented.
All right, so the motion on the floor would be one that addresses all the issues that were delayed from the last meeting. Commissioner Kulik?
I move to approve the amendment as presented.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Maddie. So we have a motion on the floor to amend the outdoor dining policy in a way that leaves the fee structure as is, clarifies the ADA accessibility requirements, and provides clarity on the use of on-street barrier parking for decks. It makes it clear they cannot be used. Is there any discussion?
I think this has been fairly well vetted by the downtown group, and I will be supporting this.
Thank you. Seeing no other discussion, all those in favor of the recommended motion say aye. 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 Those opposed? That policy is passed. And I thank the downtown board for the time that they put into this. All right. That then brings us to consider the application for outdoor dining licenses from 2 businesses. Ms. Ridley?
Yes, you have 2 of them tonight, and we're suggesting that you act on them separately. The first one is to approve the patio for the coffee room near Tavallity Coffee, which would utilize 2 of the angle parking spaces in front of their business and would incorporate an ADA ramp into the design of the patio. If approved, this license would expire on November 15th. I'll go ahead and mention the second one, hopefully so you can speed through these. The second one is for a sidewalk seating at Pleasant City Coffee, which is the exact same as the license they held in 2016, but because this is sidewalk-only seating, that one would expire December 31st if approved.
All right, so we basically we've got a recommended motion, but really we've got 2 motions. One is to approve the coffee room, coffee roasters patio plans, and the second is for the Mount Pleasant City Coffee. Is there a motion? Commissioner Kulik?
Move to approve the application for coffee, for the coffee room Narrativity Coffee Roasters outdoor seating deck.
to expire November 15, 2017.
Yes.
Seconded by Commissioner Holton. So the motion on the floor is to approve the coffee room patio. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That is approved. Second motion would be for Mount Pleasant City Coffee. Commissioner Gillis?
Move to approve the outdoor dining application until December 31st, 2017 for Mount Pleasant City Coffee. No, not Mount Pleasant, Pleasant City Coffee, excuse me.
Seconded by Commissioner Holton. So the motion on the floor is to approve the application from Pleasant City Coffee. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right, that then brings us to consider the contract for assessing services. Ms. Ridley.
As you are aware, Dave Rowley retired as the city assessor after nearly 20 years of service with the city. Based on a city our size, the state requires us to have our assessment role overseen by a level 3 assessor. We did both an employee search and a contract RFP simultaneously so that we could explore all options. The staff interviewed all that applied, and we're recommending a contract tonight for your consideration with Koch Property Services that would go until April 2019. This contract would provide us with the principal in the firm, who is Christopher Koch, who happens to be a level 4 assessor, as well as access to 3 other certified assessors in his firm, resulting in more depth available to the city. Mr. Koch would be in Mount Pleasant 3 days per week and available via phone or email on other times. The contract we've recommended to you tonight has been reviewed by the city attorney, and we believe it provides more depth in the assessing office, so we recommend you approve the contract this evening. Mr. Koch is in the audience tonight, and we plan to introduce him to you in the viewing public, assuming you approve the contract. So I would also like to mention the next item on the agenda, because they do go hand in hand. The city charter is unique in that it gives the city commission authority to appoint 4 administrative positions in the city, and the city assessor is one of those administrative positions. So if you approve the contract, the next thing you would need to do is also take formal action to approve Chris Koch as the identified assessor on behalf of the city. So we recommend approval of both of those things, and then if they're approved, Mary Ann's prepared to do a more full introduction of him.
All right, Commissioner Holton.
Move to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the assessing contract with Koch Property Services LLC.
Seconded by Commissioner Kulik. So we have a motion made by Commissioner Holton, seconded by Commissioner Kulik to authorize the signing of the contract with Koch Property Services. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll just mention I really appreciate the amount of work. I know there was a lot of work that went into this, and a lot of options were looked at, and I really appreciate the time that was put into this, and it looks like we've come up with a good way of trying to deal with this issue. So if there's no other discussion, all those in favor of approving this contract say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Contract is approved. And then the next item would be for us to formally approve consider the appointment of Chris Cook through Cook Property Services Limited as the city assessor. Is there a motion? A motion by Commissioner Holton, second by Commissioner Maddie, that we actually appoint Mr. Koch as the city assessor. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? All right. Now we can.
Mary Ann and Chris, would you like to come forward? And I just realized I'm hoping that I said his last name correctly, because if not, everybody's got it in their head now. So if you could clarify that for me, I'd appreciate it.
Actually, it's Cookie.
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 I was wrong, so
That's going to be easy to remember, though.
I apologize for that.
I'm pleased to introduce Christopher Cookie as to the City Commission and to the public as our city assessor. Chris obtained his undergraduate degree from Central Michigan University and his master's degree from Indiana University. Chris is the owner of Cookie Property Services.
See, I've got everybody doing it now.
Contract assessing is new to us here in the city of Mount Pleasant, but it's becoming more and more common in the state of Michigan. So we will be joining many of our other municipalities who have a contract assessor rather than an employment assessor. And we're really looking forward to working with Chris. He'll be in Mount Pleasant here Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. And when he's not here, Diane and I will be holding down the fort in the assessing office, and we really look forward to working with Chris. Do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone for the opportunity. I'm definitely looking forward to returning to Mount Pleasant, and looking forward to hitting the ground running tomorrow morning.
Great, thank you. We're glad to have you.
My house isn't worth that much.
All right, now, let's see, with all these numbers, are we down to authorizing the mayor to sign the letter? Okay. We're down to the old 18, new 19, which is consider authorizing the mayor to sign a letter of support to state representatives on bicycle passing lanes.
Yes, at a prior city commission, it was requested whether staff could do some research and recommend an ordinance regarding the amount of space required for bicycle passing. But during the work session discussion on this topic, there seemed to be general agreement to instead support a state law on this matter so that there aren't differences throughout the state to eliminate confusion and to make it easier to enforce. So we've drafted for your consideration tonight letters to both Senator Emmons and Representative Hauk asking them to support current legislation on this matter, and we're recommending you authorize the mayor to sign the letters on behalf of the commission.
Commissioner Gillis.
Move to authorize the mayor to sign letter of support for a bicycle passing law as presented.
Seconded by Commissioner Kulik. Is there any discussion? Commissioner Kulik.
I would just like to say I was very impressed with the research that went into writing the letter. I thought it was very well done.
Yes, I would agree with that. I was glad. I would need to point out that even though my name is on the bottom of it, I didn't do any of the research, and I did want to thank those people who did. I also thought it was extremely well
I have to give
done.
credit where credit was due. I didn't do any of the research either. Bill did it all for us, so
Well,
thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Bill, for making us look good. You know, I think it does a very good job of making it clear how out of step in some ways Michigan is with what is the law in most of the rest of the country, and makes very good arguments for why why it would be good to have both a safety zone but a consistent zone, which I think is primarily what we were talking about as a commission, was how do we make sure that people aren't, their understanding of where they're supposed to be changes every time they go across one of the jurisdictional boundaries. So I am supportive of this. Commissioner Gillis.
Hopefully, the legislature will take this up and make this a law where everyone will have to give 5 feet clearance when they're in a vehicle from a bicycle that they're sharing the road with. So for everyone out there, when you see a bicycle in the road, you must share the road with the bicycle, even if there isn't a sign.
That's true. Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all those in favor of our sending this letter recommending a consistent safety zone for bicyclists in Michigan, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed?
No.
All right. Let's see, we did that one and that one. That brings us to consider the appointment to Historic District Commission. Is that where we're at this point? Consider appointment to Historic District Commission as recommended by Appointments Committee, and I'll turn this over to the Appointments Committee.
Thank you, Mayor. The Appointment Committee met on June 8, 2017 to consider applicants for the Historic District Commission. Based on a review of potential applicants, the Appointment Committee recommends the following. The Appointments Committee unanimously recommends George Ronan for a position on the Historic District Commission for the term ending December 31st, 2019.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Holton. Any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of appointing Mr. Ronan to the Historic District Commission, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? That appointment is made. That then brings us to the appointment to 911. Ms. Ridley? Oh, no, we already did that one, didn't we? All right.
Announcements.
Public comment.
Yeah,
And announcements.
She usually skips that.
Yes, she does.
I do. And I'm a big believer in public comment. All right, that does, as I had said earlier, well, actually it brings us to the announcements first.
I love that.
And then to the public comments, right. So this is the point in our agenda where any commissioners who have any announcements that they would like to make or questions that they would like to ask, this is the appropriate time. Commissioner Gillis?
I would like to ask anyone who might be interested in serving on one of our boards and commissions. There is an application available at mountpleasant.org under Boards and Commissions, and you can fill that application out and send it in, and hopefully we'll be able to find room for you to participate. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else with any announcements? Commissioner Maddie.
I have to give my regular medical marijuana update. The next meeting for the Ad Hoc Committee on Medical Marijuana Facilities is Monday, June 19th. That is going to be our town hall meeting where it's going to have a greater opportunity for public comment. The subsequent meeting is actually going to be that same week, Wednesday, June 21st. Both meetings will be here in the City Commission chambers at 7 p.m. Please look toward the preliminary recommendation put forward by the Ad Hoc Committee, the content of which is available in an article by the Morning Sun, and it's also available on the city's website at mt-pleasant.org/MMMFLA. The preliminary recommendations, I won't, at this moment, I won't go into the details of all the bullet points, but, at this point, there is something, tangible for the public to consider and react to, and that's, at this point, that's what we're going to look toward. Subsequent meetings of the committee will try to further refine any public comment that we receive before a final recommendation is put forward to the City Commission.
Okay, thank you very much. It is an important public hearing. I appreciate your mentioning that date again, and I hope that we will get a lot of people letting us know what they think about those that proposed recommendation. Anyone else? Commissioner Holton.
Big thank you for the volunteers and sponsors for Playscape 2.0. It was a great-looking project. I was down there a couple of times to watch the volunteers working their magic down there. It reminded me of the 22 years ago when I worked on that project when it was first started. A little bit more modern than that one was put up now. So it just looks great. It was a great opening on Friday, and the kids are really enjoying it. So great asset to our parks, and thank you to the City Commission for pushing that forward as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Holton. Anyone else? All right. Seeing no other announcements, then we will come to the public comment section, and this is the point in the agenda where anybody may address the board on any issue of general city concern. Again, we ask you to give us your name and address and limit your comments to 5 minutes. Anyone who would like to address the board? Seeing no one, and without objection, are you trying to?
Just pointing out.
Oh.
Work session tonight.
Seeing no one, and since we do not have a closed session and we do not have a work session, without objection, meeting is adjourned.